And we're live. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Am I forgetting something? I really think I'm forgetting something. Yeah, Angie, you were all like, oh, you're late. Guess what? It's exactly 6 o'clock. I was not late. I did just stuff my face with food though, so I also need to take my my nightly vitamins. So I'm gonna take those too. I know, aren't they? My clock is my phone. These earrings came from the shop at the dinosaur place on Route 85. The dinosaur park. Okay. So, I hope everybody's had a wonderful, fantastic, yay, happy Sunday day. I was at work today. You know, I wanted to take a day off. Didn't happen. Because I just don't know when to quit. I just keep going and going and going and going. Today, I am tired. Okay. There we go. So, last night we read 2 chapters. We met Aunt Marge, and Harry blew her up like a giant balloon. And then he packed all of his stuff and left through the front door because, yes, I'm a Mexican jumping bean. Harry wanted out of there because he can't stand life at Privet Drive. All right, let's put the hair up. Okay, had to get rid of the headache. Sorry, guys. Hair comes down, headache goes away, hair goes back up. Because when you got hair down to your butt, it's got to go somewhere. All right. So we are on chapter 3 of The Prisoner of Azkaban. Chapter 3, The Night Bus. K-N-I-G-H-T. The Night Bus. K-N-I-G-H-T. Alrighty then. Harry was several streets away before he collapsed into a low wall on Magnolia Crescent, panting from the effort of dragging his trunk. He was quite still, anger still surging through him, listening to the frantic thumping of his heart. After about 10 minutes alone in the dark street, a new emotion overtook him. Panic. Whichever way he looked at it, he had never been in a worse fix. He was stranded, quite alone, in the dark Muggle world, with absolutely nowhere to go. And the worst of it was, he had just done serious magic, which meant that he was almost certainly expelled from Hogwarts. He had broken the decree for the restriction of underage wizardry so badly, he was surprised Ministry of Magic representatives weren't swooping down on him where he sat. Harry shivered and looked up and down Magnolia Crescent. What was going to happen to him? Would he be arrested, or would he simply be outlawed from the wizarding world? He thought of Ron and Hermione, and his heart sank even lower. Harry was sure that, criminal or not, Ron and Hermione would want to help him now, but they were both abroad, and with Hedwig gone, he had no means of contacting them. He didn't have any Muggle money, either. There was a little wizard gold in his money bag at the bottom of his trunk, but the rest of the fortune his parents had left him was stored in a vault in Gringotts Wizarding Bank in London. He'd never be able to drag his trunk all the way to London, unless... He looked down at his wand, which he was still clutching in his hand. If he was already expelled, his heart was now thumping painfully fast, a bit more magic couldn't hurt. He had the invisibility cloak that he had inherited from his father, which, if he bewitched the trunk to make it feather light, tied to his broomstick, covered himself in the cloak, he could fly to London? Then he could get the rest of his money out of his vault and begin his life as an outcast. It was a horrible prospect, but he couldn't sit on this wall forever, or he'd find himself trying to explain to Muggle police why he was out in the dead of night with a trunk full of spell books and a broomstick. Harry opened his trunk again and pushed the contents aside, looking for the invisibility cloak. But before he had found it, he straightened up suddenly and looked around him once more. A funny prickling on the back of his neck had made Harry feel he was being watched. But the street appeared to be deserted, and no lights shone from any of the large square houses. He bent over his trunk again, and almost immediately stood up at once. His hand clenched on his wand. He had sensed rather than heard it. Someone, or something, was standing in the narrow gap between the garage and the fence behind him. Harry squinted at the black alleyway. If only it would move. Then he'd know whether it was just a stray cat or something else. "Lumos," Harry muttered, and a light appeared at the end of his wand, almost dazzling him. He held it high over his head, and the pebbled, dashed walls of number 2 suddenly sparkled. The garage door gleamed, and between them, Harry saw quite distinctly a hulking outline of something very big with wide, gleaming eyes. Harry stepped backwards. His leg hit his trunk and he tripped. His wand flew out of his hand as he flung out an arm to break his fall, and he landed hard in the gutter. There was a deafening bang, and Harry threw up his hands to shield his eyes against a sudden blinding light. With a yell, he rolled back onto the pavement, just in time. A second later, a gigantic pair of wheels and headlights had screeched to a halt exactly where Harry had just been laying. They belonged, as Harry saw when he raised his hand, to a triple-decker, violently purple bus, which had appeared out of thin air. Gold lettering across the windscreen spelled "The Night Bus." For a split second, Harry wondered if he had been knocked silly by his fall. Then a conductor in a purple uniform leapt out of the bus and began to speak loudly to the night. "Welcome to the night bus, emergency transport for the stranded witch or wizard. Just stick out your wand hand, step on aboard, and we'll take you anywhere you want to go. My name is Stan Shunpike, and I'll be your conductor this eve..." The conductor stopped abruptly. He had just caught sight of Harry, who was still sitting on the ground. Harry snatched up his wand again and scrambled to his feet. Close to, he saw that Stan Shunpike was only a few years older than he was. 18 or 19 at most, with large protruding ears and a few fair pimples. "What are you doing down there?" said Stan, dropping his professional manner. "Fell over," said Harry. "What'd you fall over for?" snickered Stan. "I didn't do it on purpose," said Harry, annoyed. One of the knees of his jeans was torn, and the hand he had thrown out to break his fall was bleeding. He suddenly remembered why he had fallen over and turned around quickly to stare at the alleyway between the garage and the fence. The night bus's headlights were flooding it with light, and it was empty. "What you staring at?" said Stan. "There was a big black thing," said Harry, pointing uncertainly into the gap, "like a dog, but massive." He looked around at Stan, whose mouth was slightly open. With a feeling of unease, Harry saw Stan's eyes move to the scar on Harry's forehead. "What's that on your head?" said Stan abruptly. "Nothing," said Harry quickly, flattening his hair over his scar. If the Ministry of Magic was looking for him, he didn't want to make it too easy for them. "What's your name?" Sam persisted. "Neville Longbottom," said Harry, saying the first name that came into his head. So this bus," he went on quickly, hoping to distract Stan. "Did you say it goes anywhere?" "Yes," said Stan proudly. "Anywhere you like, long as it's on land. Can't do nothing underwater." He said, looking suspiciously again. "You did flag us down, didn't you? Stuck out your wand, didn't you?" "Yes," said Harry quickly. "Listen, how much would it be to get to London?" 11 sickles, said Stan. "But for 15 you get hot chocolate, and for 15 you get Hot bottled water and a toothbrush in the color of your choice. Harry rummaged around once more in his trunk, extracted his money bag, and shoved some silver into Stan's hand. He and Stan then lifted his trunk, with Hedwig's cage balanced on top, up the steps of the bus. There were no seats. Instead, half a dozen brass bedsteads. Bedsteads. Stood beside the curtained windows. Candles were burning in brackets beside each bed, illuminating the wood-paneled walls. A tiny wizard in a nightcap at the rear of the bus muttered, "Not now, thanks. I'm pickling some slugs," and rolled over in his sleep. "You have that one," Stan whispered, shoving Harry's trunk under the bed right behind the driver, who was sitting in an armchair in front of the steering wheel. "This is our driver, Ernie Prang. This is Neville Longbottom. Ernie Prang, an elderly wizard wearing very thick glasses, nodded to Harry, who nervously flattened his fringe again and sat down on the bed. "Take your way, Ern," said Stan, sitting down in the armchair next to Ernie's. There was another tremendous bang, and the next moment Harry found himself flat on his bed, thrown backwards by the speed of the night bus. Pulling himself up, Harry stared out the dark window and saw that they were now bowling along a completely different street. Stan was watching Harry's stunned face with great enjoyment. "This is where we were before you flagged us down," he said. "Where are we, Ern? Somewhere in Wales?" Said Ernie. "How come the Muggles don't hear the bus?" said Harry. "Them," said Stan contemptuously. "Don't listen properly, do they? Don't look properly, neither. Never notice nothing, they don't." "Best go wake up Madam Marsh, Stan," said Ernie. "We'll be in Abergavenny in a minute." That's a word. Stan pushed Harry's bed and disappeared up a narrow wooden staircase. Harry was still looking out the window, feeling increasingly nervous. Ernie didn't seem to have mastered the use of a steering wheel. The night bus kept mounting the pavement, but it didn't hit anything. Lines of lampposts, letterboxes, and bins jumped out of the way as it approached and backed into position once it had passed. That would be nice, careening down the road after you've had a couple of drinks. That tree sure is in the middle of the street, but oh no, you drive in the night bus and it's just going to jump right out of your way. Stan came back downstairs, followed by a faintly green witch wrapped in a traveling cloak. "There you go, Madam Marsh," said Stan happily, as Ernie stomped on a brake and the bed slid a foot or so towards the front of the bus. Madam Marsh clamped a handkerchief to her mouth and trotted down the steps. Stan threw her bag out after her and rammed the door shut. There was another loud bang, and they were thundering down a narrow country lane, trees leaping out of the way. Harry couldn't have been able to sleep even if he was traveling on a bus that didn't keep banging loudly and jumping 100 miles at a time. His stomach churned as he fell back to wonder what was going to happen to him, and whether the Dursleys had managed to get Aunt Marge off the ceiling yet. Stan had unfurled a copy of the Daily Prophet and was now reading with his tongue between his teeth. A large photograph of a sunken-faced man with long matted hair blinked slowly at Harry from the front page. He looked strangely familiar. "That man," said Harry, forgetting his troubles for a moment. "He was on the Muggle news." Stanley turned to the front page and chuckled. "Sirius Black," he said, nodding. "Course he was on the Muggle news, Neville. Where you been?" He gave a superior sort of chuckle at the blank look on Harry's face, removed the front page, and handed it to Harry. "You ought to read the papers more, Neville." He held the paper up to the candlelight and read, "Sirius Black, still at large. Sirius Black, possibly the most infamous prisoner ever to be held in the Azkaban fortress, is still evading capture, the Ministry of Magic confirmed today. We are doing all we can to recapture Black," said the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, this morning, "and we beg the magical community to remain calm." Fudge has been criticized by some members of the International Federation of Warlocks for informing the Muggle Prime Minister of the crisis. Well, really, I had to. Don't you know, said an irritable Fudge. Black is mad. He's a danger to anyone who crosses him, magic or Muggle. I have the Prime Minister's assurance that he will not breathe a word of Black's true identity to anyone. And let's face it, who'd believe him if he did? While Muggles have been told that Black is carrying a gun, a kind of metal wand which Muggles use to kill each other, the magical community lives in fear of a massacre like that of 12 years ago when Black murdered 13 people with a single curse. Harry looked into the shadowed eyes of Sirius Black, the only part of the sunken face that seemed alive. Harry had never met a vampire, but he had seen pictures of them in his Defense Against the Dark Arts classes, and Black, with his waxy white skin, looked just like one. "Scary looking, isn't he?" said Stan, who'd been watching Harry read. "He murdered 13 people," said Harry. The road that they're traveling on. You see the night bus over here. Handing the page back to Stan. "With one curse?" "Yep," said Stan. "In front of witnesses and all. Broad daylight. Big trouble it caused, didn't it, Ern?" Said Ern darkly. Stan swiveled in his armchair, his hands on the back, the better to look at Harry. "Black was a supporter of you-know-who," he said. "What, Voldemort?" said Harry without thinking. Even Stan's pimples went white. Ernie jerked the steering wheel so hard that a whole farmhouse had to jump aside to avoid the bus. "You out of your tree?" yiped Stan. "Just say the name for." "Sorry," said Harry hastily. "Sorry, I forgot." "Forgot?" said Stan weakly. "Blimey, my ears going that fast?" So Black was a supporter of you-know-who, Harry prompted apologetically. "Yeah," said Stan, still rubbing his chest. "You got that right. Very close to you-know-who, they say. Anyway, when little Harry Potter got paid to you-know-who, paid to you-know-who, Harry nervously flattened his fringe again. "All you-know-who's supporters was tracked down, wasn't they, Ern? Most of 'em knew it was all over with you-know-who gone, and they kept quiet. But Sirius Black, I heard he thought he'd be second in command once you-know-who had, taken over. Anyway, they cornered Black in the middle of a street full of Muggles, and Black took out a wand and blasted half the street apart, and the wizard got it, and so did a dozen Muggles that gotten away. 'Orrible, eh? And you know what Black did then?" Stan continued in a dramatic whisper. "What?" said Harry. "Laughed," said Stan. "Just stood there and laughed. And when reinforcements from the Ministry of Magic got there, he went with 'em quick as anything, still laughing his head off, 'cause he's mad, eh, Ernie? Isn't he mad?" Whew. If he weren't when he went to Azkaban, he will now. He will be now," said Ernie in his slow voice. "I'd blow meself up before I set foot in that place. Serves him right, mind, after what he did." "They had a job covered up too, didn't they, Ernie?" said Stan. "Whole street blown up and all them Muggles dead. What was it they had happen, Ernie?" "Gas explosion," grunted Ernie. "And now he's out," said Stan, examining the newspaper picture of Black's gaunt face again. "Never been a breakout of Azkaban before now, then. Beats me how he did it. Frightening, eh? Mind, I don't fancy his chances against them Azkaban guards, though. Eh, Ernie?" Ernie shivered. "Talk about something else, Stan. There's a good lad. Them Azkaban guards give me the cobbly wobblies." Trying to talk like Stan is definitely hard. I'm reading this exactly how it's written in the book, guys. Stan put the newspaper away reluctantly, and Harry leaned against the window of the night bus, feeling worse than ever. He couldn't have imagined that Stan would be telling his passengers couldn't help imagining what Stan might be telling his passengers in a few nights' time. "Hear about that Harry Potter? Blew up his aunt. We had him here on the night bus, didn't we, Ern? He was trying to run for it." He, Harry, had broken wizard law just like Sirius Black. Was inflating Aunt Marge bad enough to land him in Azkaban? Harry didn't know anything about the wizard prison, though everyone he'd ever heard speak about it did so in the same fearful tone. Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper, had spent 2 months there only last year. Harry wouldn't soon forget the look of terror on Hagrid's face when he had been told where he was going, and Hagrid was one of the bravest people Harry knew. The night bus rolled through the darkness, scattering bushes and bollards, telephone boxes and trees, and Harry lay, restless and miserable, on his feather bed. After a while, Stan remembered that Harry had paid for hot chocolate, but poured it all over Harry's pillow when the bus moved abruptly from Anglesey to Aberdeen. One by one, wizards and witches in dressing gowns and slippers descended from the upper floors to leave the bus. They all looked very pleased to go. Finally, Harry was the only passenger left. "Right then, Neville," said Stan, clapping his hands. "Whereabouts in London?" "Diagon Alley," said Harry. "Righto," said Stan. "Hold tight then." Bang! They were thundering along Charing Cross Road. Harry sat up and watched buildings and benches squeezing themselves out of the night bus's way. The sky was getting a little lighter. He would lie low for a couple of hours, go to Greencott's the moment it opened, and then set off. Where, he didn't know. Ernie slammed on the brakes, and the night bus skidded to a halt in front of the shabby, small-looking pub, the Leaky Cauldron, behind which lay the magical entrance to Diagon Alley. "Thanks," Harry said to Ernie. He jumped down the steps and helped Stan lower his trunk and Hedwig's cage onto the pavement. "Well," said Harry, "bye then." But Stan wasn't paying attention. Still standing in the doorway of the bus, he goggled at the shadowy entrance to the Leaky Cauldron. "There you are, Harry," said a voice. Before Harry could turn, he felt a hand on his shoulder. At the same time, Stan shouted, "Blimey, Ernie! Come here! Come here!" Harry looked up at the owner of the hand on his shoulder and felt a bucketful of ice cascade into his stomach. He had walked right into Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic himself. Stan leapt on the pavement beside him. "What you call Neville, Minister?" he said quite excitedly. Fudge, a portly little man in a long pinstripe cloak, looked cold and exhausted. "Neville?" he said, frowning. "This is Harry Potter." "I knew it," said Stan gleefully. "Ern! Ern! Guess who Neville is, Ern? He's Harry Potter! I can see his scar!" "Yes," said Fudge testily. "Well, I'm very glad the night bus picked Harry up, but he and I need to step inside the Leaky Cauldron now." Fudge increased the pressure on Harry's shoulder, and Harry found himself being steered into the pub. A stooping figure bearing a lantern approached through the door behind the bar. It was Tom, the wizened, toothless landlord. "You got him, Minister?" said Tom. "Will you be wanting anything? Beer? Brandy?" "Perhaps a pot of tea," said Fudge, who still hadn't let go of Harry. There was a loud scraping and puffing from behind them, and Stan and Ernie appeared, carrying Harry's trunk and Hedwig's cage, looking round excitedly. "How come you didn't tell us who you are, eh, Neville?" said Stan, beaming at Harry, while Ernie's owlish face peered interestedly over Stan's shoulder. "And a private parlour, please, Tom," said Fudge pointedly. "Bye," Harry said miserably to Stan and Ernie, as Tom beckoned Fudge towards the passage that led behind the bar. "Bye, Neville," called Stan. Fudge marched Harry along the narrow... Oh my God, my tongue! Jesus Christ! Okay. Fudge marched Harry along the narrow passage after Tom's lantern, and then into a small parlor. Tom clicked his fingers, a fire burst to life in the grate, and he bowed himself out of the room. "Sit down, Harry," said Fudge, indicating a chair by the fire. Harry sat down, feeling goosebumps rise up in his arms despite the glow of the fire. Fudge took off his pinstriped cloak and tossed it aside, then hitched up the trousers of his bottle green suit and sat down opposite Harry. Yes, I'm sure it's not vodka, it's water. "I'm Cornelius Fudge, Harry, the Minister of Magic." Harry already knew this, of course. He had seen Fudge once before, but as he had been wearing his father's invisibility cloak at the time, Fudge wasn't to know that. Tom, the innkeeper, reappeared, wearing an apron over his nightshirt and bearing a tray of tea and crumpets. He placed the tray on a table between Fudge and Harry and left the parlor, closing the door behind them. "Well, Harry," said Fudge, pouring out tea, "you've had us all in a right flap, I don't mind telling you, running away from your aunt and uncle's house like that. I'd started to think, but you're safe, and that's what matters." Fudge buttered himself a crumpet and passed the plate towards Harry. "Eat, Harry. You look dead on your feet. Now then, you'll be pleased to hear that we have dealt with the unfortunate blowing up of Miss Marjorie Dursley. 2 members of the accidental magic reversal squad were dispatched to Privet Drive a few hours ago. Miss Dursley has been punctured and her memory has been modified. She has no recollection of the incident at all, so there's that and no harm done." Fudge smiled at Harry over the rim of his teacup, rather like an uncle surveying a favorite nephew. Harry, who couldn't believe his ears, opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't think of anything to say, and closed it again. "Ah, you're worrying about the reaction of your aunt and uncle?" said Fudge. "Well, I won't deny that they are extremely angry, Harry, but they are prepared to take you back next summer as long as you stay at Hogwarts for the Christmas and Easter holidays." Harry unstuck his throat. "I always stay at Hogwarts for the Christmas and Easter holidays," he said, "and I don't ever want to go back to Privet Drive." Now, you'll feel differently once you've calmed down," said Fudge in a worried tone. "They are your family after all, and I'm sure you're fond of each other, very deep down." It didn't occur to Harry to put Fudge right. He was still waiting to hear what was going to happen to him now. "So all that remains," said Fudge, now buttering himself a second crumpet, "is to decide where you're going to spend the last 3 weeks of your holiday. I suggest you take a room here at the Leaky Cauldron and—" "Hang on," blurted Harry. "What about my punishment?" Fudge blinked. "Punishment?" "I broke the law," said Harry. "The decree for the restriction of underage wizardry." "Oh, my dear boy, we're not going to punish you for a little thing like that," cried Fudge, waving his crumpet impatiently. "It was an accident. We don't send people to Azkaban for blowing up their aunts." Blowing as in, like, blowing up a balloon, not blowing as in explosion. I think that he might be sent to prison for exploding his aunt. That would be bad. "Last year, I got an official warning just because a house elf smashed a pudding in my uncle's house," said Harry, frowning. "The Ministry of Magic said I'd be expelled from Hogwarts if there was any more magic there." Unless Harry's eyes were deceiving him, Fudge was suddenly looking awkward. "Circumstances change, Harry. We have to take into account, in the present climate, surely you don't want to be expelled." "Of course I don't," said Harry. "Well then, what's all the fuss about?" laughed Fudge airily. "Now have a crumpet, Harry, while I go and see if Tom's got a room for you." Fudge strode out of the parlor, and Harry stared after him. There was something extremely odd going on. Why had Fudge been waiting for him at the Leaky Cauldron, if not to punish him for what he'd done? And now Harry came to think of it, surely it wasn't usual for the Minister of Magic himself to get involved in matters of underage magic. Fudge came back, accompanied by Tom, the innkeeper. "Room 11's free, Harry," said Fudge. "I think you'll be very comfortable. Just one thing, and I'm sure you'll understand. I don't want you wandering off into Muggle London, all right? Keep the Diagon Alley, and you're to be back before dark each night. Surely you'll understand. Tom will be keeping an eye on you for me." "Okay," said Harry slowly, "but why?" Don't want to lose you again, do we? Said Fudge with a hearty laugh. No, no, no. Best we know where you are. I mean... Fudge cleared his throat loudly and picked up his pinstripe cloak. Well, I'll be off. Plenty to do, you know. Have you had any luck with Black yet? Harry asked. Fudge's fingers slipped on the silver fastenings of his coat. What's that? Oh, you've heard. Well, no, not yet, but it's only a matter of time. The Azkaban guards have never yet failed, and they are angrier than I've ever seen them. Fudge shuddered slightly. So I'll say goodbye. He held out his hand, and Harry, shaking it, had a sudden idea. Minister, can I ask you something? Certainly, smiled Fudge. Well, third years at Hogwarts are allowed to visit Hogsmeade, but my aunt and uncle didn't sign the permission form. Do you think you could? Fudge was looking uncomfortable. He said. No, I'm very sorry, Harry, but I'm not your parent or guardian. But you're the Minister of Magic, said Harry eagerly. If you gave me permission... No, I'm sorry, Harry, but rules are rules, said Fudge flatly. Perhaps you'll be able to visit Hogsmeade next year. In fact, I think it would be best if you don't... yes, well, I'll be off. Enjoy your stay, Harry. With a last smile and a shake of Harry's hand, Fudge left the room. Tom now moved forward, beaming at Harry. If you'll follow me, Mr. Potter, I think... he said, I've taken all your things up. Harry followed Tom up a handsome wooden staircase to a door with a brass number 11 on it, which Tom unlocked and opened for him. Inside was a very comfortable-looking bed, some highly polished oak furniture, a cheerful crackling fire, and perched on top of his wardrobe... Hedwig! Harry gasped. The snowy owl clicked her beak and fluttered down onto Harry's arm. Very smart owl you've got there, chuckled Tom. Arrived about 5 minutes after you. If there's anything you need, Mr. Potter, don't hesitate to ask. He gave another bow and left. Harry sat on his bed for a long time, absent-mindedly stroking Hedwig. The sky outside the window was changing rapidly from deep velvety blue to cold steely gray, and then slowly to pink shot with gold. Harry could hardly believe that he'd only left Privet Drive a few hours ago, that he wasn't expelled, and that he was now facing 3 completely Dursley-free weeks. It's been a very weird night, Hedwig, he yawned. And without even removing his glasses, he slumped back on his pillows and fell asleep. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm tired. Do we want to read the next one? I don't even know what time it is. Yeah, we'll read it. It's 6:34. Okay. Okay. Chapter 4. The Leaky Cauldron. It took Harry several days to get used to his strange new freedom. Never before had he been able to get up whenever he wanted or eat whatever he fancied. He could even go wherever he liked, as long as it was in Diagon Alley, and as this long cobbled street was packed with the most fascinating shops in the world, Harry felt no desire to break his word to Fudge and stray back into the Muggle world. I already started reading it. Harry ate breakfast each morning in the Leaky Cauldron, where he liked watching the other guests. Funny little witches from the country up for a day's shopping, vulnerable-looking wizards arguing over the latest article in Transfiguration Today, wild-looking warlocks, raucous dwarves, and once what looked suspiciously like a hag who ordered a plate of raw liver from behind a thick woolen baklava. Interesting characters. After breakfast, Harry would go out into the backyard, take out his wand, tap the third brick from the left above the dustbin, and stand back as the archway into Diagon Alley opened in the wall. Harry spent the long sunny days exploring the shops and eating under the brightly colored umbrellas outside cafes, where his fellow diners were showing each other their purchases. "It's a lunoscope, old boy. No more messing around with moon charts, see?" And even discussing the case of Sirius Black. "Personally, I wouldn't let any of the children out alone until he's back in Azkaban." Harry didn't have to do his homework under the blankets by torchlight anymore. Now he could sit in the bright sunshine outside of Forlean's Fortescue's ice cream parlor. Sorry, I had to figure out how to pronounce that word. Finishing off his essays with occasional help from Fortescue himself, who, apart from knowing a great deal about medieval witch burnings, gave Harry free Sundays every half hour. Once Harry had refilled his money bag with gold galleons, silver sickles, and bronze nuts from his vault in Gringotts, he needed to exercise a lot of self-control not to spend the whole lot at once. He had to keep reminding himself that he had 5 years to go at Hogwarts. How it would feel to ask the Dursleys for money for spell books, to stop himself. So he had to think about all of these things, to stop himself from buying a handsome set of solid gold gobstones, a wizarding game rather like marbles, in which the stones squirted a nasty-smelling liquid onto onto other players' faces when they lost a point. He was sorely tempted to, but the perfect moving model of the galaxy in a large glass Wow. Guys, I am like... Oy vey. Okay, here we go. He was sorely tempted, too, by the perfect moving model of the galaxy in a large glass ball, which would have meant he would never have to take another astronomy lesson. But the thing that tested Harry's resolution most appeared in his favorite shop, Quality Quidditch Supplies, a week after he arrived in the Leaky Cauldron. Curious to know what the crowd in the shop was staring at, Harry edged his way inside and squeezed in amongst the excited witches and wizards until he glimpsed a newly erected podium on which was mounted the most magnificent broom he had ever seen in his life. "Just came out, prototype," a square-jawed wizard was telling his companion. "It's the fastest broom in the world, isn't it, Dad?" squeaked a boy younger than Harry, who was swinging off his father's arm. "Irish International Sides just put in an order for 7 of these beauties," the proprietor of the shop told the crowd, "and they're favorites for the World Cup." A large witch in front of Harry moved, and he was able to read the sign next to the broom. The Firebolt. This state-of-the-art racing broom sports a streamlined, superfine handle of ash, treated with a diamond-hard polish, and hand-numbered with its own registration number. Each individually selected birch twig in the broomtail has been honed to aerodynamic perfection, giving the Firebolt unsurpassable balance and pinpoint precision. The Firebolt has an acceleration of 0 to 150 miles an hour in 10 seconds and incorporates an unbreakable braking charm. Price on request. Which means, whoo, expensive. Price on request. Harry didn't like to think how much gold the Firebolt would cost. He had never wanted anything so much in his whole life. But he had never lost a Quidditch match on his Nimbus 2000, and what was the point in emptying his Gringotts vault for the Firebolt when he had a very good broom already? Harry didn't ask for the price, but he returned almost every day after that just to look at the Firebolt. There were, however, things that Harry needed to buy. He went to the apothecary to replenish his store of potions ingredients, and as his school robes were now several inches too short in the arm and leg, he visited Madame Milkin's robes for all occasions and bought new ones. Most important of all, he had to buy his new school books, which would include those for his 2 new subjects, Care of Magical Creatures and Divination. Harry got a glimpse as he looked into the bookshop window. got a surprise. My eyes are seeing words that aren't on the page. Harry got a surprise as he looked in at the bookshelf window. Instead of the usual display of gold-embossed spellbooks the size of paving slabs, there was a large iron cage behind the glass which held about 100 copies of The Monster Book of Monsters. Torn pages were flying everywhere as the books grappled with each other, locked together in furious wrestling matches and snapping aggressively. Harry pulled his book list out of his pocket and consulted it for the first time. The Monster Book of Monsters was listed as the set book for care of magical creatures. Now Harry understood why Hagrid had sent it, and why it would be useful. He felt relieved. He'd been wondering why Hagrid wanted to help with some terrifying new pet. As Harry entered Flourish and Blotts, the manager came hurrying towards him. "Hogwarts?" he said abruptly. "Come to get your new books?" "Yes," said Harry. "Get out of the way," said the manager impatiently, brushing Harry aside. He drew out a pair of very thick gloves, picked up a large knobby walking stick, and proceeded towards the door of the monster book's cage. "Hang on," said Harry quickly. "I've already got one of those." "Have you?" A look of enormous relief spread over the manager's face. "Oh, thank heavens for that! I've been bitten 5 times already this morning." A loud ripping noise rent the air. 2 of the monster books had seized a third and were pulling it apart. "Stop it! Stop it!" cried the manager, poking the walking stick through the bars and knocking the books apart. "I'm never stocking them again. Never! It's been bedlam. I thought we'd seen the worst when we brought 200 copies of the Invisible Book of Invisibility. Cost a fortune, and we never found them. Well, is there anything else I can help you with?" "Yes," said Harry, looking down his book list. "I need Unfogging the Future by Cassandra Vabletsky." "Ah, starting divination, are you?" said the manager, stripping off his gloves and leading Harry into the back of the shop, where there was a corner devoted to fortune-telling. A small table was stacked with volumes such as Predicting the Unpredictable, Insulate Yourself Against Shocks, and Broken Balls, When Fortune Turns Foul. Ew, that's bad. "Here we are," said the manager, who had climbed a set of steps to take down a thick black-bound book. "Unfogging the Future. A very good guide to all your basic fortune-telling methods. Palmistry, crystal balls, bird entrails." But Harry wasn't listening. His eyes had fallen on another book, which was among a display on a small table. Death Omens. What to do when you know the worst is coming. "Oh, I wouldn't read that if I were you," said the assistant lightly, looking to see what Harry was staring at. "You'll start seeing death omens everywhere. It's enough to frighten anyone to death." But Harry continued to stare at the front cover of the book. It showed a black dog, large as a bear, with gleaming eyes. It looked oddly familiar. The assistant pressed Unfogging the Future into Harry's hands. "Anything else?" he said. "Yes," said Harry, tearing his eyes away from the dogs and dazedly consulting his book list. "I need Intermediate Transfiguration and the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 3. Harry emerged from Flourish and Blotts 10 minutes later with his new books under his arms and made his way back to the Leaky Cauldron, hardly noticing where he was going and bumping into several people. He tramped up the stairs to his room and went inside and tipped his books onto the bed. Someone had been in to tidy. The windows were open and sun was pouring inside. Harry could hear the buses rolling by in the unseen Muggle street behind him, and the sound of the invisible crowd below in Diagon Alley. He caught sight of himself in the mirror over the basin. "It couldn't have been a death omen," he said to his reflection defiantly. "I was panicking when I saw that thing in Magnolia Crescent. It was probably just a stray dog." He raised his hand automatically and tried to make his hair lie flat. "You're fighting a losing battle there, dear," said his mirror in a wheezy voice. As the days slipped by, Harry started looking wherever he went for a sign of Ron or Hermione. Plenty of Hogwarts students were arriving in Diagon Alley now, with the start of the term so near. Harry met Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, his fellow Gryffindors, in the quality Quidditch supplies, where they too were ogling the firebolt. He also ran into the real Neville Longbottom, a round-faced, forgetful boy, outside Flourish and Blots. Harry didn't stop to chat. Neville appeared to have mislaid his book list and was being told off by his very formidable-looking grandmother. Harry hoped she never found out that he'd pretended to be Neville while on the run from the Ministry of Magic. Harry woke up on the last day of the holidays, thinking that he would at least meet Ron and Hermione tomorrow on the Hogwarts Express. He got up, dressed, and went for a last look at the firebolt, and was just wondering where he'd have lunch when someone yelled his name, and he turned. "Harry! Harry!" They were there, both of them, sitting outside Florine Fortescue's ice cream parlor. Ron looking incredibly freckly, Hermione very brown, both waving frantically at him. "Finally," said Ron, grinning at Harry as he sat down. "We went to the Leaky Cauldron, but they said you'd left. And we went to Flourish and Blots and Madame Milkins and—" "I got all my school stuff last week," Harry explained. "And how come you know I'm staying at the Leaky Cauldron?" "Dad," said Ron simply. Mr. Weasley, who worked at the Ministry of Magic, would of course have heard the whole story about what happened to Aunt Marge. "Did you really blow up your aunt, Harry?" said Hermione in a very serious voice. "I didn't mean to," said Harry, while Ron roared with laughter. "I just lost control." "It's not funny, Ron," said Hermione sharply. "Honestly, I'm amazed Harry wasn't expelled." "So am I," admitted Harry. "Forget expelled. I thought I was going to be arrested." He looked at Ron. "Your dad doesn't know why Fudge let me off, does he?" "Probably 'cause it's you, isn't it?" said Ron, still chuckling. "Famous Harry Potter and all that. I'd like to see what the ministry'll do to me if I blow up my aunt. Mind you, they'll have to dig me up first, because Mom would have killed me. Anyway, you can ask Dad yourself this evening. We're staying at the Leaky Cauldron tonight, too. So you can come to King's Cross with us tomorrow. Hermione's there as well." Hermione nodded, beaming. "Mum and Dad dropped me off this morning with all my Hogwarts things." "Excellent," said Harry happily. "So have you got all your new books and stuff?" "Look at this," said Ron, pulling a long, thin box out of a bag and opening it. "Brand new wand. 14 inches, willow, containing 1 unicorn tail hair. And we've got all our books." He pointed at a large bag under his chair. "What about this monster book, eh? The assistant nearly cried when we said we wanted 2. "What's all that, Hermione?" Harry asked, pointing at not 1, but 3 bulging bags in the chair next to her. "Well, I'm taking more new courses than you, aren't I?" said Hermione. "Those are my books for arithmancy, care of magical creatures, divination, study of ancient runes, Muggle studies." "What are you doing taking Muggle studies for?" said Ron, rolling his eyes at Harry. "You're a Muggle-born. Your mum and dad are Muggles. You already know all about Muggles." "True, but it'll be fascinating to study them from the wizard's point of view," said Hermione earnestly. Sounds like me. I would love to study things from other people's points of view, if I can read without tripping over my words. "Are you planning to eat or sleep at all this year, Hermione?" asked Harry, watching Ron. Hermione ignored them. "I've still got 10 galleons," she said, checking her purse. "It's my birthday in September, and Mom and Dad gave me some money to get myself an early birthday present." "How about a nice book?" said Ron innocently. "No, I don't think so," said Hermione composedly. "I really want an owl. I mean, Harry's got Hedwig, and you've got Errol." "I haven't," said Ron. "Errol's a family owl. All I've got is Scabbers." He pulled his pet rat out of his pocket. "And I want to get him checked over," he added, placing Scabbers on the table in front of them. "I don't think Egypt agreed with him." Scabbers was looking thinner than usual, and there was a definite droop to his whiskers. "There's a magical creature shop just over there," said Harry, who knew Diagon Alley very well by now. "You can see if they've got anything for Scabbers, and Hermione can get her owl." Whew. So they paid for their ice creams and crossed the street to the magical menagerie. There wasn't much room inside. Every inch of wall was hidden by cages. It was smelly and very noisy because the occupants of these cages were all squeaking, squawking, jabbering, or hissing. The witch behind the counter was already advising a wizard on the care of double-ended newts, so Harry, Ron, and Hermione waited, examining the cages. A pair of enormous purple toads sat gulping wetly and feasting on dead blowflies. Yuck, my nose itches. A gigantic tortoise with a jewel-encrusted shell was glittering near the window. Poisonous orange snails were oozing slowly up the sides of their glass tank, and a fat white rabbit kept changing into a silk top hat and back again with a loud popping noise. That would be disturbing. Then there were cats of every color, a noisy cage of ravens, a basket of funny custard-colored fur balls that were humming loudly, and, on the counter, a vast cage of sleek black rats who were playing with some sort of game using their long bald tails. The double-ended newt wizard left, and Ron approached the counter. "It's my rat," he told the witch. "He's been a bit off color ever since I brought him back from Egypt." "Bang him on the counter," said the witch, pulling a pair of heavy black spectacles out of her pocket. Bang him on the counter? Harry lifted Scabbers out of his inside pocket and placed him next to the cage of the fellow rats, who stopped their skipping tricks and scuffled to the wire for a better look. Like nearly everything Ron owned, Scabbers the rat was second-hand. He had once belonged to Ron's brother Percy, and a bit battered. Next to the glossy rats in the cage, he looked especially woebegone. Said the witch, picking Scabbers up. "How old's this rat?" "Dunno," said Ron. "Quite old. He used to belong to my brother." "What powers does he have?" said the witch, examining Scabbers closely. Said Ron. The truth was that Scabbers had never shown the faintest trace of interesting powers. The witch's eyes moved from Scabbers' tattered left ear to his left paw, which had a missing toe, and tutted loudly. "He's been through the mill, this one," she said. "He was like that when Percy gave him to me," said Ron defensively. "An ordinary common or garden rat like this can't be expected to live longer than 3 years or so," said the witch. "Now, if you were looking for something a bit more hard-wearing, you might like one of these." She indicated the black rats, who promptly started skipping again. Ron muttered, "Show-offs." He's loyal to his Scabbers. "Well, if you don't want a replacement, you can try this rat tonic," said the witch, reaching under the counter and bringing out a small red bottle. "Ouch!" said Ron. "Okay," said Ron. "How much?" "Ouch!" Ron buckled as something huge and orange came soaring from the top of the highest cage, landed on his head, and then propelled itself, spitting madly at Scabbers. "No, Crookshanks, no!" cried the witch, but Scabbers shot from between her hands like a ball of soap, landing splay-legged on the floor, and then scapered for the door. "Scabbers!" Ron shouted, harrowing out of the shop after him. Harry followed. Harrying out of the shop, as in running fast. It took them nearly 10 minutes to find Scabbers, who had taken refuge under the waste paper bin outside Quality Quidditch Supplies. Ron stuffed the trembling rat back into his pocket, straightened up, massaging his head. "What was that?" "It was either a very big cat or quite a small tiger," said Harry. "Where's Hermione?" "Probably getting her owl." They made their way back up the crowded street to the magical menagerie. As they reached it, Hermione came out, but she wasn't carrying an owl. Her arms were clamped tightly around the enormous ginger cat. "You bought that monster?" said Ron, his mouth hanging open. "He's gorgeous, isn't he?" said Hermione, glowing. That was a matter of opinion, thought Harry. The cat's ginger fur was thick and fluffy, but it was definitely a bit bow-legged, and its face looked grumpy and oddly squished, as though it had run headlong into a brick wall. Now that Scabbers was out of sight, however, the cat was purring. contentedly in Hermione's arms. Crookshanks! Chasing Scabbers! I can't tell if the artist got in the missing toes on the rat. I don't think he did. Also, you're welcome. I took my hair out of my face. Hermione, that thing nearly scalped me, said Ron. I didn't mean to, did you, Crookshanks, said Hermione. And what about Scabbers, said Ron, pointing at the lump in his chest pocket. He needs rest and relaxation. How is he going to get that with that thing around? That reminds me, you forgot your rat tonic, said Hermione, slapping the small red bottle into Ron's hand. And stop worrying. Crookshanks will be sleeping in my dormitory and Scabbers in yours. What's the problem? Poor Crookshanks. That witch said he'd been in there for ages. No one wanted him. I wonder why, said Ron sarcastically as they set off towards the Leaky Cauldron. They found Mr. Weasley sitting in the bar reading the Daily Prophet. Harry, he said, smiling as he looked up at him. How are ya? Fine, thanks, said Harry, as he, Ron, and Hermione joined Mr. Weasley with their shopping. Mr. Weasley put down his paper, and Harry saw the now familiar picture of Sirius Black staring up at him. They still haven't caught him yet, then? He asked. No, said Mr. Weasley, looking extremely grave. They pulled us all off our regular jobs at the Ministry to try and find him, but no luck so far. Would we get a reward if we caught him? Asked Ron. It'd be good to get some more money. Don't be ridiculous, Ron, said Mr. Weasley, who on closer inspection looked very strained. Black's not going to be caught by a 13-year-old wizard. It's the Azkaban guards who'll get him back, you mark my words. At that moment, Mrs. Weasley entered the bar, laden with shopping and followed by the twins, Fred and George, who were about to start their 5th year at Hogwarts, and the newly elected head boy Percy, and the Weasleys' youngest child and only girl, Ginny. Ginny, who had been very taken with Harry, seemed even more heartily embarrassed than usual when she saw him, perhaps because he had saved her life during the last term at Hogwarts. She went very red and muttered, "Hello," without looking at him. Percy, however, held out his hand solemnly, as though he and Harry had never met, and said, "Harry, nice to see you." "Hello, Percy," said Harry, trying not to laugh. "I hope you're well," said Percy, pompously shaking his hand. It was rather like being introduced to the mayor. "Very well, thanks." "Harry," said Fred, elbowing Percy out of the way and bowing stupidly. "Simply splendid to see you, old boy." "Marvellous," said George, pushing Fred aside and seizing Harry's hand in turn. "Absolutely spiffing." Percy scowled. "That's enough now," said Miss Weasley. "Mum," said Fred, as though he had only just spotted her and seized her hand too. "How rather—" I don't think that's a term of endearment. "How rather corking to see you." "I said that's enough," said Mrs. Weasley, depositing her shopping in an empty chair. "Hello, Harry, dear. I suppose you've heard our exciting news?" she said, pointing at the brand-new silver badge on Percy's chest. "Second head boy in the family," she said, swelling with pride. "At last," Fred muttered under his breath. I don't doubt that," said Mrs. Weasley, frowning suddenly. "I notice they haven't made you two prefects." "What would we want to be prefects for?" said George, looking revolted at the very idea. "It'd take all the fun out of life." Ginny giggled. "You want to set a better example to your sister," snapped Mrs. Weasley. "Ginny's got other brothers to set her an example, Mother," said Percy loftily. "I'm going to change for dinner." He disappeared, and George heaved a sigh. "Oh, we tried to shut him in a pyramid," he told Harry, "but Mum spotted us." Dinner that night was a very enjoyable affair. Tom, the innkeeper, put 3 tables together in the parlor, and the 7 Weasleys, Harry, and Hermione ate their way through 5 delicious courses. "How are we getting to King's Cross tomorrow, Dad?" asked Fred, as they tucked into a scrumptious chocolate pudding. "Oh, the minister's providing a couple cars," said Mr. Weasley. Everyone looked at him. "Why?" said Percy curiously. It's because of you, Perce, said George seriously. And there'll be little flags on the bonnets and HB on them. For a humongous big head, said Fred. Everyone, except Percy and Mrs. Weasley, snorted into their pudding. Why are the ministry providing cars, Father? Why is the ministry providing cars, Father? It says why are. R is... No, that's grammatically incorrect. Why is the ministry providing cars, Father? Percy asked again in a dignified voice. Well, I think we haven't got one anymore, said Mr. Weasley, and as I work there, they're doing me a favor. His voice was casual, but Harry couldn't help noticing that Mr. Weasley's ears had gone red, just like Ron's when he was under pressure. Good job, too, said Miss Weasley briskly. Do you realize how much luggage we've all got between you? A nice sight you'd be in the Muggle underground. You were all packed, aren't you? Ron hasn't put his new things in his trunk yet, said Percy in a long-suffering voice. He dumped them on my bed. You'd better go and pack properly, Ron, because we won't have much time in the morning, Mrs. Weasley called down the table. Ron scowled at Percy. After dinner, everyone felt very full and sleepy. One by one, they made their way upstairs to their rooms to check their things for the next day. Ron and Percy were next door to Harry. He had just closed and locked his own trunk when he heard angry voices through the wall and went to see what was going on. The door of number 12 was ajar, and Percy was shouting. He was here, on the bedside table. I took it off for polishing. I haven't touched it, all right, Ron roared back. What's up? Said Harry. My head boy badge is gone, said Percy, rounding on Harry. So's Scabbers' rat tonic, said Ron, throwing things out of his trunk to look. I think I must have left it in the bar. You're not going anywhere till I've found my badge, yelled Percy. I'll get Scabbers' stuff. I'm packed, Harry told Ron, and he went downstairs. Harry was halfway down the passage to the bar, which was now very dark, when he heard another pair of angry voices coming from the parlor. A second later, he recognized them as Mr. and Mrs. Weasley's. He hesitated, not wanting them to know that he'd heard them rowing, when the sound of his own name made him stop, and then move closer to the parlor door. It makes no sense not to tell him, Mr. Weasley was saying heatedly. Harry's got a right to know. I've tried to tell Fudge, but he sits on treating Harry like a child. He's 13 years old, and... Arthur, the truth will terrify him, said Miss Weasley shrilly. Do you really want to send Harry back to school with that hanging over him? For heaven's sake, he's happy not knowing. I don't want to make him miserable. I want to put him on his guard, retorted Mr. Weasley. You know what Harry and Ron are like, wandering off by themselves. They've even ended up in the Forbidden Forest. But Harry mustn't do that this year. When I think what could have happened to him that night he ran off from home. If the night bus hadn't picked him up, I'm prepared to bet he would be dead before the ministry found him. But he's not dead. He's fine. So what's the point? Molly, they say Sirius Black's mad, and mad he is, but he was clever enough to escape from Azkaban, and that's supposed to be impossible. It's been a month now, and no one's seen hide nor hair of him, and I don't care what Fudge keeps telling the Daily Prophet. We're no nearer catching Black than inventing self-spelling wands. The only thing we know for sure is that Black's after... But Harry will be perfectly safe at Hogwarts. We thought Azkaban was perfectly safe. If Black can break into Azkaban, he can break into Hogwarts. But no one's really sure that Black's after Harry. There was a thud on wood, and Harry was sure Mr. Weasley had banged his fist on the table. Molly, how many times do I have to tell you? They don't report it to the press because Fudge wanted to keep it quiet, but Fudge went to Azkaban the night Black escaped. The guards told Fudge that Black's been talking in his sleep for a while now. Always the same words. He's at Hogwarts. He's at Hogwarts. Black is deranged, Molly, and he wants Harry dead. If you ask me, he thinks murdering Harry will bring you-know-who back to power. Black lost everything the night Harry stopped you-know-who, and he's had 12 years alone in Azkaban to brood on that. There was silence. Harry leaned... That's a weird sentence, too. There was a silence. Harry leaned closer to the door, desperate to hear more. Well, Arthur, you must do what you think is right, but you're forgetting Albus Dumbledore. I don't think anything could hurt Harry at Hogwarts while Dumbledore's headmaster. I suppose he knows about all of this. Of course he knows. We asked him if he minds the Azkaban guards stationing themselves around the entrances to the school grounds. He wasn't happy about it, but he's agreed. Not happy? Why shouldn't he be happy if they're there to catch Black? Dumbledore isn't fond of Azkaban guards, said Mr. Weasley heavily. Nor am I, if it comes to that. But when you're dealing with a wizard like Black, you sometimes have to join forces with those you'd rather avoid. If they'll keep Harry safe, then I will never say another word against them, said Mr. Weasley wearily. It's late, Molly. We'd better get up. Harry heard chairs moving. As quietly as he could, he hurried down the passage to the bar and out of sight. The parlor door opened, and a few seconds later, footsteps told him that Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were climbing the stairs. The bottle of rat tonic was lying under the table they had sat at earlier. Harry waited until he heard Mr. and Mrs. Weasley's bedroom door close, and then headed back upstairs with the bottle. Fred and George were crouching in the shadows of the landing, heaving with laughter as they listened to Percy demantling his and Ron's room in search for his badge. We've got it, Fred whispered to Harry. We've been improving it. The badge now read, Big Head Boy. Harry forced a laugh and went to give Ron the rat tonic and then shut himself in his room and lay on his bed. So Sirius Black was after him. That explained everything. Fudge had been lenient with him because he was so relieved to find him alive. He'd made Harry promise to stay in Diagon Alley, where there were plenty of wizards to keep an eye on him. And he was sending 2 ministry cars to take them all to the station tomorrow, so that the Weasleys could look after Harry until he was on the train. Harry lay listening to the muffled shouting next door, and wondered why he didn't feel more scared. Sirius Black had murdered 13 people with one curse. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley obviously thought Harry would be panic-stricken if he knew the truth. But Harry happened to agree wholeheartedly with Miss Weasley that the safest place on earth was wherever Albus Dumbledore happened to be. Didn't people always say that Dumbledore was the one person Lord Voldemort had ever been afraid of? Surely Black, as Voldemort's right-hand man, would be just as frightened of him. And then there were these Azkaban guards everyone kept talking about. They seemed to scare most people senseless, and if they were stationed around the school, Black's chances of getting inside seemed very remote. No, all in all, the thing that bothered Harry most was the fact that his chances of visiting Hogsmeade now looked like 0. Nobody would want Harry to leave the safety of the castle until Black was caught. In fact, Harry suspected his every move would be carefully watched until the danger had passed. He scowled at the dark ceiling. Did they think he couldn't look after himself? He'd escaped Lord Voldemort 3 times. He wasn't completely useless. Unbidden, the image of the beast in the shadows of Magnolia Crescent crept across his mind. What to do when you know the worst is coming? I'm not going to be murdered, Harry said out loud. That's the spirit, dear, said the mirror sleepily. Yes, said the mirror sleepily. I am tired. Honestly, I don't know if I'm tired or if it's pollen, but I can't take any more allergy meds today. All right. Those 2 chapters are finished with. I need to go put away dinner and cook some dog treats. Thank you for watching. Have a good night, guys.